Right. So in order to talk about reconstructive memory, I need to first start talking about propositions. So I know we've talked about this before in the representations lecture, but it's good to review, especially because we're going to need that information for this lecture. So what is a proposition? A proposition isn't quite a sentence, but it's like a sentence. It's just a statement that can be true or false, right? So the book is red, the book's color is red, el libro is rojo. These all express the same proposition, even though they're different, they're slightly different ways to say things, right? And of course, the Spanish translation of this, the Spanish proposition, even though it's different words, you're still activating the prelingual concepts that are associated with those words. And so it would express the same proposition, even though they're different words. And complex sentences can express more than one proposition, right? So the sentence, the big brown dog is hungry, that has three propositions. The dog one is big, dog one is brown, and dog one is hungry. Okay. And so representations can be of the propositional form. So one idea, we've talked about this, but it's one idea is that we store propositions, right? All of what we know is driven by stored propositions in our mind, as well as, the inferences that come from those representations or propositions. And so I'm going to show a study now that illustrates this, right? So if the sentence was the geese crossed the horizon as the wind shuffled the clouds, right? That has two propositions in it that are connected, right? So it has geese crossed the horizon and wind shuffled the clouds. And they're connected, but the idea is that if a sentence is represented as two propositions that are connected, then only concepts belonging to the same proposition should facilitate processing of the other, right? So, and this is a reasonable assumption. If concepts prime related concepts, then a concept should prime a concept in the same proposition more than it would prime a concept in a different proposition, right? So we can think of this, we can depict these propositions in terms of a network of concepts. Um, so yeah, so here, you might look at this and say, okay, well, if you see the geese word, right, geese concept will get activated and it'll spread its activation to the horizon concept, right? And wind will get activated and spread its activation to the clouds concept, right? And so, of course, the activation from wind uh, will eventually spread to horizon, and likewise, the activation from geese will also spread to clouds, but it'll take longer simply because it has to travel through more concept nodes, right? One more. And so that's the idea, right? And so in the study, participants were shown um, sentences like the one we just saw, and then they were given a speeded recognition test. So they saw the word clouds, great, it doesn't really matter. The thing that was interesting is when they saw the word horizon, for example, did they respond and say that that word had been studied faster when it was preceded by geese or wind, right? So the idea is that does geese prime the concept of horizon faster than the wind concept primes horizon? And according to this idea, horizon should be correctly responded to faster when preceded by geese than by wind, by simply because geese and horizon are belong to the same proposition, right? So yeah, after reading all the sentences, participants were given a recognition test in which they were presented words that had been presented in the sentences from the study phase. And the researchers measured response time to correctly recognize previously seen target words. In this case, the target word would be horizon. Importantly, on the trial that preceded the target word, participants were shown a word that had been part of the same proposition as the target word, or the word that was not part of the same proposition, right? So, and this makes the prediction that uh, concepts or words, I should say, words that are connected to the horizon concept or in that proposition should prime that word more than words that belong to a different proposition. So concepts from the same proposition should prime concepts from the same proposition more than if they were from different propositions or yeah, propositions, sorry. And so that's indeed what they found, right? Target words were recognized faster when primed by words from the same proposition relative to when words were relative to when primed by words from a different proposition. And the conclusion from this is that sentences are stored as propositions. And so we can store propositions, right? So if I had seen if I read the sentence Sally likes pets, she has a black cat. This has three propositions nested within the sentence. So Sally likes pets, Sally has cat one, and cat one is black, right? We can show it that this is and if we this is like our semantic knowledge, right? We know that humans keep pets. Cats are pets, dogs are pets, dogs chase cats, cats chase mice, and dogs like bones, right? So this is like our semantic knowledge. And then, so what we can do is you should remember or note that there are directly stated propositions like Sally has a cat, right? We know that Sally has a cat. And so, because it was directly stated that Sally has a cat, and that's one thing that we could store. But we also probably store inferences, right? And these inferences are propositions that follow from the directly stated propositions or from other inferences. So in this example, Sally likes cats. Okay, so Sally likes cats. Does that follow? Well, it wasn't directly stated that Sally likes cats, but presumably, if Sally likes pets and cats are pets, then it follows or it should follow that Sally likes cats, right? Okay. And so yeah. And so there are logical inferences. There are two type of inferences that you could store. There's uh, inferences that necessarily follow from the directly stated proposition. So Sally has a pet. That's true, right? Because Sally has a cat and cats are pets. And then Sally's cat is a mammal. That follows because we know that cats are mammals, right? And then and so those are ones that necessarily follow, right? They're logically consistent with what we know about the world. But then there's pragmatic inferences. And so these are things that are probably true, but not necessarily. So we might say that Sally takes good care of her cat. That's an inference that we've made. Doesn't necessarily follow, but it seems like it should, right? If Sally likes cats, right, or likes pets, and she has a cat, then presumably she would take care of that cat, right? But it doesn't necessarily follow. That's the point. She might not take very good care of her cat. And likewise, it could be that Sally buys cat food. That makes sense, right? If she has a cat, why wouldn't she buy the cat food? But it could be that her parents buy cat food or her roommate buys the cat food. It doesn't necessarily follow. Okay, so in the next video, we're going to talk about the turtles experiment.